What's up, guys? This is the Jose Show. Happy Wednesday. I cannot believe that we are already in the middle of the week and it is almost September, ladies and gentlemen. Time is really going by really quick, and honestly, I am just like, damn, I still remember when it was just January of 2025. But anyways, we still have a lot of good stuff to talk about, so now let's get to it. Now, I'll start off today's show talking about Abby and Brittany Hensel. So Abby and Brittany Hensel are deep in family mode with Abby's hubby, Josh Bowling, weeks after welcoming their first kid, and even the family dog joined the outing. So the famous conjoined twins were spotted keeping it low-key over the weekend in their Minnesota hometown, dropping their Labradoodle at the groomer while Josh handled a grocery run at the local market. So the whole crew looked happy and settled, truly in the thick of family life with the newborn in the mix. Things are clearly busy. Okay, so remember earlier this month, TMZ snagged pics of the twins loading a car-seated baby into a Tesla, though they've still kept mum on whether the little one's theirs. All right. So, anywho, as we all know, Abby and Brittany set the internet buzzing last year when word got out. Abby tied the knot with Josh back in 2021, sparking endless questions about the relationship dynamics. Okay, so this is really insane that Abby and this other girl were seen out and about grocery shopping, and they were, of course, having a really good time. And of course, they were, being themselves, obviously, which to me is perfectly fine because, why shouldn't they be themselves while they're out and about grocery shopping? And what's really insane is that, they were with their husband, Josh Bowling. And Josh Bowling, to me, seems like a really gentleman guy to me because he was just out there helping them out, and he was just out there wanting to be very supportive of what they were doing in the grocery shopping. And they were like, okay, well, if they want to be with their dogs and they also want to be with me, then so it be, because at the end of the day, we are a family after all. Why shouldn't I leave them alone? And at the end of the day, it's also very rare having to see that there is a conjoined family going on here. And to me, it's also really insane because I have never seen that there are conjoined twins going on. But hey, they are happy to be conjoined. They have been conjoined for a very long time now. And, I believe that as long as they're not beefing, as long as they are not going after each other and pulling each other's hair, I think it should all be fine. Okay? Because, it would have been a living hell if Abby and Brittany Hensel were to be conjoined and they wouldn't be getting along with each other, because then that would make their lives a living hell, because then later on, they would be wanting to do bad things to each other, and that is one thing that we all don't want, and that's one thing that Josh Bowling also doesn't want at all. Okay? The dogs, by the way, are really cute, by the way, because their dogs look really adorable. And the fact that one of the Hensels got to welcome a first kid, to me, is very insane, because a conjoined twins having a child, or one of the conjoined twins having a child, to me is really interesting, because if they're conjoined, then does that mean that the both of them gave birth to the child, or does that mean that one of them gave birth to the child while the other one didn't? I'm a little bit confused on that one, because I'm seeing here that it's being said that one of them welcomed their first kid, and that's really insane. But anyways, if that's the case, then hey, I'm hoping that one of the Hensels gets to have a really good time being a mother, and that, all turns well with the kid, behaving well, and that Josh Bowling gets to support them with the child that they now have, or with the child that one of them has. And that's all I have to say. All right, now on to the next topic. Now let's talk about something extremely serious. So unfortunately, there was a horrific shooting going on over in Minneapolis this morning. Well, police rushed to a Catholic school in Minneapolis in response to a shooting Wednesday morning during Mass. At least 2 children are dead and as many as 17 people were injured. According to KSTP-TV, dozens of law enforcement officers responded to the pre-K through 8th grade Annunciation Catholic School around 8:40 a.m. local time. Personnel from the FBI, Minnesota State Patrol, Minneapolis Minneapolis police and ATF were at the scene, according to local reports. So the suspected shooter died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound at the scene. At least 16 kids are being treated at local hospitals, according to CNN. So federal sources said the suspect was a man wearing all black and carrying a rifle, according to WCCO-TV. A man who lives near the school did local outlet KARE-TV what he heard as shots and rang out. So claiming the shooting went on for several minutes. All right, so Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey spoke at a press conference a couple hours after the shooting, asking people to band together in the face of this unspeakable tragedy. And Mayor Frey said children and parents shouldn't live in fear of mass shootings at schools, adding people shouldn't just offer thoughts and prayers during this difficult time. Okay, and the shooter, by the way, was 20 years old, and he just came out of nowhere shooting and getting all violent. Okay, so this is what I have to say about this. I think that it is really devastating and it's really scary that these days, especially in schools, it is so unsafe to go to because of these horrible shootings. I believe that at this point, a lot of things need to be done here by our government in order to make these schools and in order to make everywhere else super safe. Because at this point, I believe that none of us can be going out anywhere. And I think that now is the time to not only make all of these places safe, but also I believe that now is the time to really get together and speak up about all of this, especially because I believe that the more that we are speaking out about all of this, the more that we're going to get into an agreement with something in order for stuff to actually be more secure, for places to be more secure, man. Because at this point, it really breaks my heart that more of these things are happening. And what really breaks my heart even more is that kids, ladies and gentlemen, are getting their lives taken away, which, by the way, they were just sitting down and praying and worshiping God. And, you know, they were basically praying to God that they were going to have a really good day and this and that. And then all of a sudden, this horrific shooting ends up happening out of nowhere. And I believe that some of these kids are no longer in this planet anymore because of this horrible shooting. And a lot of them are already injured, which God forbid that they end up being dead at this point. And I hope that they survive from all of this. To the ones that got to suffer a wound but are in the hospital, man, I think that at this point, ladies and gentlemen, a lot of people are going to end up going to school online. And at this point, going to school online is going to have to be the first source because of these shootings. But I believe that going to school online is not the same thing like going to school in person, because when you're going to school online, you're not really communicating with people the same way that you are communicating with them in person. And you are not really learning the same way like you are learning in person. So at this point, people need to go out and, you know, go to school in person and do stuff in person. But at this point, it's just so darn scary, like I said, having to do all of these things because of these horrific shootings that keep on happening. And what's even more sad, by the way, is that this horrific shooting just happened at the very beginning of the school year, when, by the way, all of the kids should be happy that they're back at school, seeing their friends again, seeing new teachers, new faces. And, you know, they should also be happy that they're learning once again after having like 2 months off in the summer. And that's it. But unfortunately, this happened. And you know what? I have a feeling that this 20-year-old person that ended up shooting all of these kids over at this Catholic school is a person that might have mental issues, because I don't think that just anybody is going to be going out of nowhere, shooting, especially poor innocent kids out of school. So I did hear, by the way, that the shooter did get shot. So at this point, we're not going to be able to hear anything from the shooter as to why the shooter did what he did. But you know what? Since the shooter got shot, I mean, at this point, I'm going to have to be realistic here. I'm glad that he is no longer with us, because that shooter is a horrific person. And, you know, this shooter at this point, you know, he was just a danger to society. He was a danger to society. All right. But my hearts and prayers go out to the kids, to the victims, and especially to the parents. All right, now on to the next topic. Now let's talk about Stuart Psycho Stu Smith. So, good news for Stuart Psycho Stu Smith on the medical front. The pro wrestler is conscious and communicating from his hospital bed, according to Douglas Mallow, the man who came to the rescue and stopped Raja Jackson during the brutal attack. So, Stu remembers mostly what happened during the early parts of the day. He's talking a little bit, he's alert, he's still got some injuries that are very serious, not like life-threatening serious, but facial injuries, stuff like that, Malo told TMZ Sports. Alright, so Smith has been hospitalized since the violent and ugly incident on Saturday, which could have been significantly worse if Malo hadn't stepped in and stopped Raja's attack. So by intervening, Doug found himself tussling with Jackson, and although he has some bumps and bruises, he believes he could have been seriously injured. So anywho, apparently, there is a GoFundMe page that is dedicated to Smith, and apparently fans and supporters have stepped up for the wrestler in a big way, donating around $150,000 to a GoFundMe designed to help him out to cover his medical expenses. And Mr. Beast donated $10,000, while wrestling superstar Chris Jericho gave $2,500 in addition to loads of others. Okay, so this is really insane, and I believe and I'm hopeful that Stu is going to be all right, even though I know that the whole entire injuries were not very major, because honestly, Stu doesn't deserve to go through this, and I think that it's just very evil and it's very atrocious that a very psycho person like Raja Jackson would just go off and attack this guy out of nowhere. And I believe that the reason why this Raja guy ended up going after Stu is because there might have been some type of beef from the past that this guy wanted to go after him for that. And I believe that he was even considering it a revenge after all. And I just think that it's just not good having to be doing such a thing. I think that this guy should have been like, you know what, regardless of all of what we went through in the past, it is what it is, move on and be calm. And that's if this guy went after Stu because of the fact that there was something bad going on. I don't know exactly what happened, to be realistic with you guys. But I think, though, that what's going to end up happening, though, is that since this Raja guy went after Stu, Raja is going to be facing a lot of consequences from law enforcement. And I think that one of them is that he's going to end up getting a little restraining order from Stu. So that way Stu won't end up having any contact with him, and Raja won't end up having any contact with him as well, so that way Stu won't end up in any danger anymore. Because what happens with these type of people like Raja is that they will not just attack you once, they will attack you more and more and find you and find you. It is a whole entire danger right there. And then another thing that could end up happening too is that this Raja guy is going to be facing a bunch of charges of, you know, assault and, you know, harassment and this and that from the police, you know. And I think that is definitely valid, because that's how it should be. Okay, now I'm so glad that this guy, who happens to be the friend of Stu, got to intervene in the whole entire fight, because if it wasn't for this guy, who happens to be Douglas Mallow, then Stu would have definitely been dead by now, or he would have been even more seriously injured, and that would have been so bad for the poor guy. Okay, but the fact that Mr. Beast got to go in and donate, and Chris Jericho got to donate, and then the fans have been donating and already reaching $150K in the GoFundMe page to be covering his medical expenses, just comes to show how loved this guy Stu is. And he is very lucky, by the way, that he has a bunch of support from everyone, including the one and only Mr. Beast, because this just comes to show that he really is not alone in life, and that he is definitely in not any danger nor any trouble anymore with all of this. You know, I mean, I would have been so darn happy if I were him, that's for sure. But anywho, this is definitely one of those things where, unfortunately, there will be people out there that will go after you and that will just try to tear you apart, man. they will tear you apart. But my prayers go out to Stu. My prayers definitely go out to this Stu dude. All right, now on to the next topic. Now let's talk about J-Lo. So J-Lo may be hustling to stay queen of every stage and screen, but her former co-star Luis Guzman just yanked the tiara right off her head. So, the Wednesday star who plays Gomez Adams on the Netflix hit was quizzed by co-star Emma Myers on his takes about past colleagues, and after showering Catherine Zeta-Jones and Adam Sandler with love, he hit J-Lo with a limp shrug and a flat okay. Alright, so Louis' meth-level response sent shockwaves all across the table. Even Jenna Ortega and Joy Sunday were wide-eyed, giggling as the awkwardness hung in the air. Okay, so Louis teamed up with J-Lo back in the 1998 crime comedy Out of Sight, but it looks like no ride or die friendship came from that gig. It sounds like the vibe just wasn't there. Alright, so this is really insane that Luis Guzman is over here kind of shadying J-Lo, because I thought that everyone loved J-Lo at this point because J-Lo was a very kind, sweethearted person. But I just think that maybe some people at this point, after seeing Luis Guzman's response, that maybe some people might see J-Lo as a diva-ish person. I mean, I think that J-Lo, in my opinion, has this thing where she's very open, she's very real, she's very social, she is very about the fans, about the people that surround her, and I haven't ever seen anything bad out of J-Lo. I just don't see it in her, and also the way she's always smiling at people and stuff like that, I just don't see it in her that she's a very bad person or that she's a very negative, toxic person. Okay, I mean, maybe Mark Anthony can say otherwise, maybe A-Rod can say otherwise, maybe Ben Affleck can say otherwise because those men were with J-Lo, but like I said, I am not going to be shading J-Lo at all. And I think that Luis Guzman, I believe, should have just said something kind about J-Lo, because J-Lo at the end of the day got to share the screen with Luis Guzman way back in the day with this movie Out of Sight, and I believe that maybe he might have had at least a little bit of a really good experience with J-Lo off of this movie anyways, because, I mean, I have seen some parts of this movie and I did notice that J-Lo was, funny, and she was just, out there, and that Luis Guzman and her got along at least in front of the screen, and, there was just no shadiness going on. And also the fact that Luis Guzman got to work with J-Lo in the first place, to me already sound like, okay, well, maybe Luis Guzman was actually okay with working with J-Lo in the movie after all. And if things were really not that okay in between Luis Guzman and J-Lo, then Luis Guzman would have not even joined the movie in the first place, or J-Lo would have not joined the movie in the first place. Okay, so let's just keep it simple. Let's just keep it simple. Like, Jesus Christ, I was not expecting a response like this from Luis. I was not. Okay, and I mean, a lot of people are, I'm pretty sure, already wondering if J-Lo's personality to him was already bad, or if maybe there was a bunch of diva energy. I'm not the only one wondering as to why Luis Guzman responded in a very negative way about J-Lo. So, anywho, to all the J-Lo fans, y'all can go off and defend J-Lo. Y'all can go off and go after Luis Guzman. I don't care. But anyways, all I can say is that J-Lo is one of the most successful people out there, and one of the most successful Latinas out there, especially one of the few successful Latinas out there here in America to actually make it into the Hollywood business. Because let's remember that not only has she had a lot of successful movies, but also she has had a lot of successful albums, and she definitely has been, out there in her music. She's been out there with her movies. She has been known worldwide already. And also, I believe that at this point, J-Lo is already in the point where she's going to be getting her start at the Hollywood Walk of Fame. And that's if she hasn't gotten it yet. So, hey, I mean, let's just say that she's successful, she's awesome and everything, and let's keep it at that. All right, now that is it for today's show, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you guys enjoyed today's lovely episode of The Jose Show. Till next time, and peace.